Mel,
Brandon,
great to see you.
great to see you too, my friend.
Been a busy week for us.
Yes, it has indeed.
I spent Monday evening going to the college meeting via Zoom.
Interesting. And I spent the night at a commission meeting.
Was it interesting?
Oh, dear God.
Not so much, huh?
It's embarrassing. It's
Well,
really embarrassing.
How'd it go for you?
Well, the meeting was kind of, non-consequential, but they had we're doing another study, a 77 study, and I knew some intersection problems, and so they're rambling along in this meeting, and it was a motion and a second. They immediately started voting. I said, wait a minute, I've got a question. And I was met with the most obstinate look and remark. A question? What's this question about? I said, well, what do you think it's about? It's about what we're talking about. And then everybody stared at me. And then it was like, well, why now? Can't you wait for voting? So what's the point of asking the question after you vote? It's a moot point then. Let me ask my damn question.
Is this Karen or
This is Karen.
Dwayne?
This is Karen. I should have said, hey, it's about your hair. How pretty it is. That would
have slowed her up.
But they don't understand Robert's Rules of Order. They just don't get it. Dwayne doesn't get it. She doesn't get it.
Well, I did notice last time at the last commission meeting I went to, which was 2 weeks ago, I wanted to go to see how they're going to handle the mask thing, and you guys do need to reflect on the Robert's Rules of Orders. And I'm not sure if that's by law, that's what you guys got to do, but you need to go revisit it, because there were some things happening last time. They would make a motion, get a second, and then all in favor say aye. Well, at these city commission meetings, these aren't roll call votes. So when everybody says yay or nay or however, if you don't declare, when the county clerk or the city clerk or the mayor isn't declaring whether or not the motion carries or fails, nobody really knows, and you don't know who voted. And it's important to understand who that is, and you can say motion carries 4-1.
It's just standard rules for everybody's, and the audio sucks on the whole thing, and everything is just, and this, the last time it was Dwayne Eastman in this call to vote, and that's not the way Robert's Rules works.
When he was calling the question,
call the question, call the vote. You can do that, but that's just hey, is anybody else, let's wrap this, anybody else got anything to say? It's not the end, it's not a command, it's not an order. And then the same thing where well, how dare you ask a question? I said, well, it's my right, and that was the appropriate time to ask it.
Yeah, it was, because the way they do it, they're the ones that establish these guidelines within reason, but if you have something that isn't on the agenda, you get to the meeting before the meeting begins, and you write down, my name is Brandon, I live on so-and-so street, and then you write, and it's courteous to write down what the topic is that you want to speak about.
But if it's not on the agenda.
If it's not on the agenda, but if it's an agenda item, then I think their policy says they give you 2 to 3 minutes to speak about any item that's on the agenda. So it's appropriate to say any further discussion, and then that's when there should be discussion among not only the board members, but to peer out into the audience and see if anybody has any.
And it looks like you're covering something. It looks like you're trying to subversively get this thing passed real quick before anybody says anything. And I'm going, oh, no, it's not. Well, it damn sure looks like it. In fact, if I was going to do it, that's the way I would do it. Call the vote, we vote, or motion carries vote.
So on the pretense of bad ethics of Robert's Rules or whatever, that's kind of how the college meeting went last night. It was a little scrambling.
That's right. You went to the college meeting. You zoomed in.
I zoomed in. I kind of wish I'd have been there, because I think I miss a lot by just watching through the eyes of a cell phone or a laptop.
Yeah, you don't see the body motion or anything, or
you don't see as much. You don't get as much, but so the big topic last night, or at least I thought was going to be, was they went around. It was about 30 or 40 minutes in the meeting. They started out with a budget, which I thought Holly Harper did a nice job with that, and then they got to the point, Mel, about talking about appointing these vacant trustee positions, which there's truly 3 vacancies, but they can only appoint 2 right now because the one isn't 14 days out yet, the Nancy Berger one.
Well, back a little tiny bit, I went on to the college website, and I was going to watch the Zoom meeting after the fact.
Yeah.
It's not on there.
Yeah, it's not recorded, and we'll get to that.
There's no recording. There wasn't any. Also, there wasn't any stenographer notes on the thing. Anyway, there's nothing. There's a blank hole.
Well, they'll be in the next meeting minutes. I mean, they'll
that
capture
doesn't
that.
do anybody any good.
I understand that, but hear me out. So they end up doing a fairly good job in this respect, and I've got I don't know how they decided it. They kind of just briefly touched on how they wanted to do it, but they started with Sanderholm and said, who are the two you want to vote for? And so he said his two, and then just went around the room. Well, end up being Joanne Foster got four yays. They wanted her, and Chris Swan got 3. Dennis Schertz got 1. Mike Berganini got 1. And
but you said Jolene and Swan really did a good job. So this was
and I think the trustees. It did tell me a little bit about Doc. I thought we were questioning how that was going to go, and I think he did just fine in that regard. And so then here's what was neat, Mel. So she got the most votes. Glennis, or not Glennis, but Jolene Foster did. She got 4 votes, and then Chris Swan got 3. And so they were going to give the longer term, which was a 3.5-year term and like a 1.5-year term. They were going to give the longer term to Jolene Foster because and even though some of the trustees had expressed, I want this guy to be in for this long, and, but it didn't really add any more to the vote. But so they went ahead and were getting ready to make a motion, and maybe they did make the motion, and then Jolene Foster said, "Hey, may I speak?" And she come up to the microphone and said, "Hey, I appreciate you guys, but I really would rather do the shorter term.
Don't want the commitment."
And I thought that was extremely, and to me, again, I told you I was really impressed with her last time. I thought that was a very commendable, noteworthy thing.
Because should she change her mind, she can always run.
Sure. And so I thought that was a nice job. I thought she did a good job with that.
Yeah, I like to.
And so Swan got the longer term, and then Jolene Foster got the shorter term. But here's the interesting part, and you've seen this at city meetings, and I can't remember the last time a trustee one was appointed other than Nancy Berger, and I need to go back and look and see how it was done. But they didn't immediately seat these 2 people. So they just voted them in.
Were they both in audience?
I believe so, yeah. I mean, I don't know that because I wasn't there personally, but I think they were. I know she was because she got up and spoke and I could see her.
Well, is there a procedure?
Well, traditionally, at least in city and county stuff, they swear them in at the beginning of the meeting. But, if you just reflect back to when Jim Seibert was appointed here, what was that, last year sometime? They immediately, after they voted on it, they called him up there. The city clerk sworn him in, and he was seated at the table. And they didn't do that last night. And I don't know if that's precedence or otherwise, but I
have no idea.
But it was certainly interesting. And here's why it was interesting. Later on in the meeting, things go on, blah, blah, blah. In fact, they had like some fire drill or some shit. It was just blaring in my ear. And they had to take a recess.
The alarms?
Oh, yeah. I thought maybe it was a tornado warning because it was a little bit stormy out, but fire drill went off. And so they took a little recess, came back, and then they go into executive session to discuss acquisition of real property. Roger and Diane Sparks go in there, which they're the ones that got the Dale Carnegie.
If there's a fire drill, do you have to wear your mask?
Probably not. Might help you.
Are they flame-proof?
I don't know, Mel.
Oh. Think about these things.
So they all go into executive session. They come back out, and they all start discussing purchasing.
Oh, Roger Sparks, yeah.
Roger Sparks, Dan Sparks go into executive session to talk about the Dale Carnegie building, which is right across from the Scott Auditorium, just to the west of the bookstore there. And anyhow, they come back out and start discussing whether or not they're going to purchase this building. They never once divulged the price, and here's where it gets interesting. And, Ned Graham, I got to give him credit. I don't give that guy credit often because he normally sleeps under a rock, it seems like. But he's like, well, can we at least purchase the building without committing to work on it? Because Doc Arnett asked, what's it going to take to rehab this building? And Dr. Riddle gets up there and Riddle says, well, so-and-so did an examination and they're guessing $700,000 for minimal usage type use. But if you want it to look and present like other Cowley College properties, you can plan on doubling that. So we don't know what the purchase price is up to this point. We just know it may take up to $1.4 million to rehab this thing. And they go ahead and I say they vote, but here's where it gets funny. I don't think, and again, back to your deal about recordings, which we'll get to in a moment, but they didn't record the meeting, and so I can't go back and look, but I don't think they ever made a motion, Mel, to purchase this building, for starters, okay? I don't think they did. And they certainly never got a second, I don't believe. And then they immediately went and...
Well, how did it come to vote?
Well, so they had all this discussion. They kind of digressed into what they're going to do with the building, the plans for it. They want to make a welcome center and this art center and all this fancy shit that will never pay back for the college that just borrowed more money from the taxpayers. And I say borrowed, stole, took, whatever you want to call it. But so any other discussion? And Doc Arnett commands the board clerk, Ms. Vollmer, to say, how do you vote? How do you vote? How do you vote? And then so they go around and vote. Well, then I think Arnett realizes that they never actually made a formal motion and or a second. And this is how I recall it, but I can't go back and watch it because you guys didn't record it. But then, and then he kind of describes what they just voted on. And the terms of what they voted on was something along the lines of subject to attorney review, Cowley College's attorney review, but they never disclosed the price, which I'm not even sure. Mel, is that legal? Can you purchase something without ever publishing?
Not on a taxing entity, absolutely not. They have to let the taxpayer know how much they're paying and what it is.
And it's not like they said, we're going to enter into a contract with Roger and Diane Sparks. They didn't say that. I mean, the intent was to purchase it, and that's what they said.
Do they not know what the price is?
I don't know what the price was. When they brought it up a few months ago, it was $300,000, and so I know I would imagine they've negotiated a price less than that, but I don't know, Mel. It seemed procedurally defunct.
So how did Arnett describe what they were doing? What was his call to action?
Agreement to purchase, and he described this, I believe, after they voted. But agreement to purchase, pending review of college review of the contract or something like that. Basically, giving them an out if they don't like something in the contract. If the Cowley College attorneys agree to it or read it, then they have a way out. But
well, maybe it's a sweetheart deal. Maybe it's a good thing.
Well, I did reach out to one of the trustees, and they said that, and they brought it up in the discussion that they've got a bunch of backers that are going to fund it. But I don't know what that looks like yet. In the meeting, Wilson referenced some guy named White for good for $100,000, and that was the only figures that were ever spelled out as being donated to rehab this building. But that's
5%.
That's 5% of this, proposed project. So it doesn't really mean much. I mean, while it's a gracious gift, sir, thank you, Mr. White. But it's such a.
And how does this mesh into their? I mean, what do you say they're going to make it into? What, a welcome center?
Yeah, either a welcome center and or an art studio. They just really don't know. But it was just kind of. Mel, it's one of these things. If they spend $1.4 million on it, while I agree that it's a wonderful piece of property, it's right there in the middle, but they just literally tax the taxpayers more money, because they didn't have enough money to maintain the buildings they got.
I want to defend this action. I want to defend these guys for what they do, but I'm struggling with it.
So I do want to tell you how it voted, because Arnett had the first vote, I believe. Harold, how do you vote? And he voted no, and the other four voted for it. Wilson, Zimmerman, Sanderholm, and Ned Graham all voted for it. So four, and here's the interesting thing.
So there's five in attendance.
That's what I don't understand. So because they didn't set the other two guys, or guy and gal, they didn't set Joe in, they didn't set Chris Swan. The other two of the other members were there, but they didn't seat them. So to me, it just seemed rushed. You guys had to get that through before you got the other two board members on board. It just seemed, and the third one within a couple, I'm sure nothing had to be that extravagantly done that quick. And so I went and looked at the Kansas cash basis laws, and I don't really understand all this, but in subsection A it says all members of the governing body shall vote on this, and it should be a majority. Well, not all members of the governing body voted because they've got some vacancies, and they just appointed 2 people that they had in seats. So, and it only passed 4-1. And if there was an 8-member board and it's 4-8, Mel, I'm just not even sure. I'm not sure if it was a legal vote to begin with. I'm not sure if, because of that Kansas Caste Basis Law, Section 116C, I'm not even sure that it's illegal. What they did was legal. I don't know. I have to talk to one of my attorney friends soon. Because, what do you think?
I'm kind of at a loss. I'm assuming that it was some kind of sweetheart deal. They had to make a move on it right away. There had to have been some kind of time constraint because it's not divulging, well, they didn't know the price or they forgot to talk about it, which is certainly possible.
But every other, I mean, Mel, they don't let anybody at the college spend money. I mean, hell, later in the meeting, or maybe it was right before, anybody that got raises that work at the college, it had to be approved by the trustees, and it was spelled out.
Well, they've been eyeballing that building for a long time.
They should have owned it 40 years ago, but they didn't. And
so if they've got, it's going to be, what did you say, 700,000 doubled, so it'd be 1.5 million.
At a minimum.
Plus the cost of building buildings, what, 300,000, 350,000?
300 is what they were asking for it a few months ago. So even if they got that at half price, at 150 grand, shit, Mel, they're already over $1.5 million. It's just I don't get it. But I didn't. But all right. So back on the recordings. So later, after all this went down, then it was brought up. Should we or shall we? Are we required? And I don't know what prompted this. And I have begged the question before about why aren't their meetings recorded? It would be convenient. So if people wanted to watch them, they could. But so they asked their attorney, Andres, to go out and review whether or not they're obligated to record the meetings. And his short answer was they're not required to do it. However, it does represent a high level of transparency, which is, when I was on the city commission, Mel, I effectively forced their hand to record the meetings. And I asked, and it took me months of going in there every Wednesday following a commission meeting and saying, I want my copy of the recorded meeting, because I wanted objective evidence of what I did or didn't do.
Yeah.
And and I'm not faulting any board clerk on any commission anywhere, but they're just the scribes. I mean,
it's actually a lot deeper than that. Because I remember when I was on the board, there was public access television. They recorded the meetings. You could watch the whole thing, and they played it over a week for a 2-week period, and then you could buy the CD if you wanted, or the tape. And then they started putting them on YouTube.
And that's where I got them. It was on YouTube.
Well, they kind of started not liking that, and they came up with the excuse that YouTube wouldn't let them put something that long on there. YouTube was new, and I didn't know the difference, so I kind of bought off on it, and it was a lie. It was just a bald-faced lie.
Yeah, they're definitely
just
on YouTube.
They did not want to record the meetings and make them public accessible because they like things secret. They're afraid to tell you the truth.
So, and I don't know where Harold Arnett and the president was at on this. I kind of got the vibe that, and Harold, his demeanor last night was a little bit off, and I'm sure the fire drill screwed things up a little bit, but he wasn't quite on his game like he normally is on running the meeting. He was having a little bit of a challenging night, and I'm going to blame that on the fire drill because it did disrupt things for quite a while. But
so
I felt like he wanted the meetings to be recorded because he asked 2 or 3 times, like, does anybody want to make a motion that we record the meetings? And Glennis Zimmerman was like, well, I don't want to change anything. I want to leave it the way we are. And then Gary Wilson's like, well, I'll make a motion to leave it the same. And Harold's like, well, we don't need to make a motion to leave it the same. That's what we're already doing. And so they backed off of that, and it just kind of fizzled away. But I really think they should reconsider the idea of
I think
recording
they
the
should,
meetings.
because I'm having a hard time. I'm trying to defend the college. I want to, since I wasn't there, I'm assuming everything's on the up and up, but you go back to review it and it's not there. And
this is a perfect example. The way that meeting ran last night of why they ought to be recorded.
And if the minutes aren't published for another month, what's the point? And if they don't trust the public enough to tell them what's really going on, then it's a problem. That's a damn problem.
I don't know. To me, it just the whole meeting.
I'm not if the price is right and everything, and I have a hard time with the college expansion thing because I know they're struggling to keep it, but I know they've been eyeballing this for a long time, and there might be extenuating circumstances, a one-time deal. I don't have any idea. I got no idea.
And there probably is some of that.
There's nothing available.
Yeah. And I just can't imagine, Mel. And I maybe you're right, but it's been going on this long. Why do we have to make a decision right now, yesterday, 10 minutes after an executive session?
And that's
when we got 3 open spots, but 2 of them were actually appointed but not sworn in, and 1 of them will be available to be appointed in 2 weeks from now. To me, it just stunk. And
that's a legitimate question that I don't have an answer for. I cannot defend them because it's indefensible.
And Riddle never came out and said. I kind of got the tune where he said, it's going to cost $700,000, but if you wanted to look to the Cowley College standard, it's going to double that. I kind of got this sense that, hey, I've been asking all my staff, all my people to not necessarily take pay cuts, but to really crunch their budgets interdepartmentally, to really pull back the reins because we don't have any money and we're going to have a big deficit and we're trying to combat this shortfall. And, he even praised them earlier in the meeting for that. And then, but yet we're going to go out and spend this money. And maybe there is going to be some windfall with donations like that one trustee said, but I just don't know, Mel.
Well, and until it's hard to say one way or the other until you know what the price is, you don't know how they're paying for it, you don't know what it's going to cost.
But to your point, I guess if they spent $300,000 and they just mothball that thing until they can afford to do something with it, I'm not exactly at odds with it. I'm more upset about the way it went down than I am.
Does it have value as an investment property?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think how it could. I mean, it's a nice, good-looking historical building, but it's so purpose-built that it's just not really. Parking's an issue.
Well, one other thing
windows
too,
are an issue
about that, is the premise earlier on, just this year, they were having trouble, with the cost of maintaining buildings, right?
And that's a really valid point.
And this building, this is like buying a Model A car or an old classic wooden boat. Yeah. This thing's going to take a ton of money.
I mean, it's just going to cost you
rehab.
A couple hamburgers a month.
Just a couple hamburgers a month.
Oh, and that's on top of the other hamburgers we're paying. How many hamburgers a month does this thing cost?
All the damn hamburgers. So I don't know, Mel. We'll see what happens, but
and they leave themselves open to these.
And that's probably why they don't want them recorded, because of guys like us. But we put ourselves out there.
Shit,
we record this shit. We make it public. If we say something you don't like, come talk to us
about
it.
Please challenge us.
We challenge you every time you say something we don't like. So
yeah, and it's not about saying something we personally don't like. It's stuff like this is lack of transparency. You don't understand Robert's rules. You leave yourself wide open to these criticisms, and just do a better job. Come on.
We're here to make it better.
If you don't think anybody's looking, then might be wrong.
Mel, we got to go.
It may be that somebody's looking.
College, I want you to go do your research, see if what you did last night was actually legal. Check that out for me. And also, I'd like to know what you purchased this thing for. It's my tax dollars. I need to know what the terms of that agreement was.
City commissioners, if you're not going to be geniuses, at least know the damn rules. It's kind of simple, and if you follow the damn rules, I don't want anything to bitch about.
And college, start recording your meetings.
And then record your meetings. And goes along with the city also. Do a better job recording meetings. You can't.
The audible at the college on the Zoom meetings is great.
On the Zoom meetings.
And
that's
the
because
video.
It's mic set.
Yeah, but I mean, they do a nice job with it. But the city, they do record them, but the audio is terrible.
Oh, it's awful.
So, anyhow, we got enough to bitch about. I think we did it. Mel, we got to go.
We do. All right.
Sign off.
Balakaja.